Oh, hello there, adventurers. Welcome to the Rumblesmiths campaign. Firstly, I'd like to thank everybody for showing an interest in playing Dungeons & Dragons. I know that for some of you, it's the first time that you're playing Dungeons & Dragons at all, and for others, it's your first time playing 5th edition. This should be a very fun campaign. In this video, I'm going to give a little bit of a background on my custom campaign setting. I'm also going to give a little mini history of the world, where your actual campaign is going to be taking place, and also the available playable races. There are some that are in addition to the player's handbook, and I'll tell you where you can get those printouts, that way you can see what the races have. So, my campaign is a custom setting. My buddy Mitch helped me actually make a map, so we have a world map. I'll put a link from my Dropbox in the description for the YouTube video, and I'll also put a link in the group. And I'm just going to give a rough overview of the 8 different land masses that are in Orisia, which is the name of the planet. So Kabul is the first landmass. It's kind of like the Middle East in culture and also in temperature and climate. Its largest city is San Markand, which is a port city. It is mostly a trading continent, with most of the trading being done on the east coast of Kabul. They have a very large fleet. It's not necessarily a navy, but it is a fleet of trading ships. And they also have some privateers to give you an idea of what backgrounds your characters can have if you choose to be from Kabul. The next landmass that we have is Gifstal. Gifstal is huge. It is like a combination of Europe and Russia in size. There's a large mountain range that runs north to south through the center, and there are many kingdoms. I'm not going to give names for all of the kingdoms because that gives you guys a little bit of literary freedom to make it up as you go along. And as long as you tell me what you're doing, I'll most likely give you the rubber stamp of approval. I wish I actually had a rubber stamp. That'd be cool. Next landmass is Garbandred. Garbandred is very much like Australia in climate and also in the hostility of the animals and people that live there. Our Garbandred started off as a penal colony, so anybody who broke the law one too many times would be shipped off there. Because of the way that the currents run, and also due to a giant maelstrom at the south end of the crescent moon-shaped piece of land that is Garbandred, once you went there, it was very hard to come back. So it was kind of a no man's land. The towns that are in Garbandred are mostly made up of shipwrecks, and so that's the kind of shape that they have, and also the type of materials they were able to claim to create structures. The next landmass that we have is Skogafell. Skogafell is about the size of South America, and the entirety of it is like the Amazon. It is all trees and forests and craziness going on. Skogafell is interesting in the regard that there's no natural magic that comes from there. So if a character were from Skogafell, they would have met a traveling wizard, but there are no wizards that are born on Skogafell. The magic in the land has kind of been nullified. Next landmass that we have is Kalfar. Kalfar is kind of like Asia. It's a blend of Southeast Asia, China, and Japan in culture and in ethnicities. And this applies for humans as well as all other races for the ethnicities. Kalfar is magically rich, and since it is neighboring in the ocean to Skogafell, it kind of explains why Skogafell doesn't have any magic. Kalfar is where the dragons started. We'll get to that. The dragons are coming. Don't worry, they're coming. So Kalfar is a Asian kind of flair. If anybody's played 3.5, Oriental Adventures, the Jade Forest, and also the war that they mention in that book, I kind of pulled from that for my inspiration for Kalfar. Felfit is our next landmass. It's kind of like Scandinavia, very much on the northern portion of the globe in the northern hemisphere. It used to be uninhabitable. It was kind of like Greenland, had a nice name, but nobody lived there. But due to a series of events in the world history, it is now habitable. All the way to the south is Vatnsdalsfell, which is basically Antarctica. Nobody lives there. Nobody really comes from there. It's rumored that only elementals and really like horrible monstrosities live there. So some people adventure there, but not many. The last place we have on our map is Logi Island, or Fire Island. It has a gigantic volcano and is a point of contention within the world history. The Battle of the Ancients took place on Logi Island, and because of that battle, warm currents were created due to like the supercharging of a volcano that was on the island, which allowed Felfit to thaw out, and now people can live on Felfit. So Felfit's kind of a new territory, so not many people are originally from there. Maybe some elves who are adapted to the cold climate, maybe some half-orcs. For the rest of the continents, it's kind of a mishmash. I really don't have, this is where the humans live and that's where the elves live. If you want to be from a particular area, either for ethnic flair or for adventuring points or for a certain portion of your backstory, as long as you can justify it to me and it makes logical sense, I'm cool with it. So, the history of the world, part 1 of 1. When Orisia was formed, there were 3 moons. There are now 2 moons. The gods of each of the races helped to populate the earth, and they taught each of their races, which were made in their own likeness. So you have Yandala, who is the goddess of the halflings. You have Moradin, who is the god of the dwarves, and so on and so forth. The name of the god that created the humans has been lost to history, which is interesting. I like that twist, and I kept it. Once these races were established and were taught the crafts by their gods, the gods were kind of like, we did good work. High five. I'm off to my plane. How about you? So they went off and they separated to their own planes of existence. They keep an eye on their people, they help the faithful, but they're not in touch directly with the world. I don't ever want to force anybody's hand to have to pick a religion in Dungeons and Dragons. So if you want to be an atheist in Orisia, that's okay. If you want to be agnostic, that's also okay. So once the gods left, creatures from below the depths of the Underdark, and the Underdark is the underground caves and cavern kind of system where drow live and other kind of nasties. Also gnomes, certain types of gnomes, and some dwarves also live in the Underdark. So below the Underdark, the Illithids, also known as the Mind Flayers, lived. And once the gods left, the Illithids began to come to the surface. When they started to come to the surface, they started to hatch a plan to blot out the sun so the world could be coated in darkness and they could take over the surface. Upon hearing this, a god that hadn't been part of the creation story so far, Bahamut, the Platinum Dragon, breathed life into one of the moons, and the moon floated towards Orisia and cracked. It became an egg. All of the dragons in existence, the chromatics and the metallics, the chromatics are like the evil aligned and the metallics are the good aligned, all of the dragons came down in the form of platinum dragons. Once they chose where they were going to live, their scales changed to the appropriate color, and during that time, they started to figure out what side they were going to take, against the Illithids or with the Illithids. During this time, this is also when they became good and evil. So a huge battle broke out and took over the surface of Orisia, and kind of reset the world in a sense. But this was thousands of years after the civilizations had been established, so we're talking a pretty decent chunk of time. So the dragons came down to the earth, they battled with the Illithids, they were able to almost eradicate them. I leave in that almost because having mind flayers is really, really fun in a campaign when characters aren't expecting mind flayers because they've been told they were wiped out. Mostly. So they were mostly wiped out. And the dragons settled into their territories. They were kind of like, you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. But there were still some rivalries, and the world was able to kind of heal itself and pick itself back up. But because the dragons landed on Skogafell, the area became magically kind of scarred, and that's why you don't have warlocks or wizards or naturally magical people from Skogafell. That area just, it doesn't have that latent energy. The ley lines were kind of cut. So that's the history of the world. Now, on to the fun part. The acceptable, playable races allowed in Rumblesmiths Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition 3rd level campaign. Everything from the player's handbook. Let me just throw that out there. Everything that's in the player's handbook, you can use. dwarves, elves, halflings, humans, dragonborn, gnomes, half-elves, half-orcs, tiefling, and if they don't cover it in that book, drow. Drow are usually covered in the monster manual, but I do believe there's a section in the elf component of the player's handbook that explain the drow. They're totally acceptable. You just have to tell me why a drow would come from the Underdark to the surface to join an adventuring academy. If you can justify it and make it sound like a cool story, we're good to go. That's my rule of thumb for almost all points of character creation. If you can tell me a cool story to justify it, awesome, do it. Other races that are allowed. These are from the Unearthed Arcana, which is a monthly publication that Wizards of the Coast puts out. And they put this out so they can introduce new ideas, new character races, new spells, new subclasses. And they put out a quiz also after each of these issues of Unearthed Arcana, so that way after people play test them, they can kind of fine-tune them and tweak them. So from the Unearthed Arcana, Shifters are allowed, Warforged are allowed, Deep Gnomes, Ganassi, and there are 4 elemental varieties, Earth, Air, Water, Fire, and Goliaths. So those are the ones that are allowed. The only 2 that I'm cutting out are the Aarakocra, because it involves not just the X and the Y axis, but the Z axis, and I don't like that because math and trigonometry, and it makes combat slow down, and it can sometimes be a buzzkill at the table when you're like, well, if you think about it diagonally, and then you have to start getting into like this crazy math speak. It's a lot of effort, and for a beginning session, I don't want to bog us down. I want us to have fun. I want us to have a good time, throw some great combatants at you, and just enjoy ourselves. So Aarakocra are out. The other ones that are out are the Shape Changers or Doppelgangers. Personally, I think they're broken. I think that they need a retuning, and until Wizards of the Coast releases something that kind of tweaks them a little more, having somebody who can just snap their fingers and say, I look like a human, I look like an elf, I look like a dwarf, I look like a cat, I look like a goat, or whatever they can do. It's too overpowered, it's a little too intense. So no Shape Changers for that regard. Other than that, play what you want to play. Think of an archetype of a fantasy character from a movie or a book or another source that you really enjoyed. I've been having some discussions with some of the players, so people have been bringing up some very interesting archetypes. You've got Strider from Lord of the Rings as kind of an archetypical ranger. You've got Legolas, who would be an archetypical fighter, bow and arrow user. You've got other sources as well. Don't forget about anime. Vampire the Hunter D could almost be an Eldritch Knight because he's got that face in his hand. So instead of that, you could almost have it as a source of mana for casting spells. So if you take these ideas that you're familiar with and tweak them a little bit, you can find a race and a class combination that work really well that you would enjoy playing. And we're also going to start at level 3. I think I've mentioned this before. On June 14th, I'm going to have character sheets for everybody. They have been simplified greatly since 3.5. I love them so much. And so on June 14th, we will build our characters. But in the meantime, if you have questions, like I said in the beginning, email me, call me, text me, put a message in the Facebook group, message me directly, whatever you want to do. I'm here to help you because I want you guys to have a really great time with your campaign. The only other thing I would say is stuff that you need for preparation for the actual campaign would be dice. I have 2 sets of dice. Nobody likes to use them because they say that they're cursed because they're the DM dice. Whatever. If you can get your hands on a set of dice beforehand, great. If not, I know I have a couple of people in my current party who are willing to loan their dice out. But some people are a little hesitant about that. You put good juju in your dice. I rolled a 2, never mind. You put good juju in your dice and you want to keep your good juju in your dice. Like I said, I'm happy to loan out one of my sets. But dice are definitely something you want to take into account. Miniatures, I have a zillion. We have boxes and boxes and boxes of miniatures. There are so many up there. I also have a Tiamat miniature. I won't throw that at you, but I might put it on the table for fun. The only other thing would be I recommend getting a good notebook, so that way you can take notes during the campaign. This is usually good for long haul campaigns, but if you pick up items along the way, the character sheets do provide you with a small box for treasure. But if your handwriting's not that small, and mine never is, I suggest a notebook. Just something cheap you can pick up at the dollar store or, you know, something like that, CVS, whatever. The last optional thing, if you want, is a dice tower or a dice roller. I like these because they guarantee that your roll is going to be random, as opposed to just kind of like shaking it in your palm and maybe it's spinning, maybe it's not, maybe it's stuck on the same number. Maybe you roll all 7s on your D20. I mean, if you want dice tower, I have mine available. You can borrow it. We also have Arthur's dice tower, which is gorgeous, and it's all Lego. It's really pretty. He did a good job on this one. So we have 2 dice towers here. I got mine online for something like $7. The great thing is it's collapsible, so I can break it down and put it away anytime I want. But if you're not going to be playing a lot of role-playing games, we have 2 that are available, and they'll be available for use. Other than that, our campaign is going to be taking place on the eastern shore of Gifstal. So like I said, kind of like Europe. On the southeast portion of Gifstal is an archipelago. It's a chain of islands, which are kind of like, I don't know, I never really culturally decided what they are. They're sort of like the Caribbean, they're sort of like England, they're just cool and a moosh. But we're going to be on the eastern side of Gifstal. So I will need a reason why your characters traveled there. How did you find out about the Adventuring Academy? Do you personally know Bjorn Alesmith or heard of his fantastical awesome deeds, which Art will come up with later? Or were you just looking for some way to make your name, or are you trying to get vengeance for something? You know, use those typical motivators for fantasy characters and integrate them into your story as you see fit. So find a reason why your character would have traveled to Eastern Gifstal. And when I put the map up in the group, I'll actually mark it with like a little X about where we're going to be, so you can see where it is in relation to all of the other continents. Did you need to travel for weeks and months and years to get there, or was it close to your village? That's up to you, and I leave that to your discretion. On that note, thank you for watching this video. I hope it's been informative. Again, give me feedback if there's anything else that you want me to cover. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys on June 14th. This is Angie the DM, signing off.